All right. Well, sorry, we're kind of a little late today. We had a couple technical difficulties this morning, but welcome to Coffee and Cargo. We're happy to have you guys here today. I see some people kind of just joining in as we go. But before I do any introductions, I just wanted to let you guys all know that we are going to be doing a Q&A at the end or kind of during our webinar here today. We'd love to hear your guys' questions and answer them as we go. So if you see the Q&A at the bottom, please feel free to put some questions in there and we'll try to get to as many as we can today. But just some introductions. My name is Rachel and we also have Courtney here today. We both work in the marketing department. And then we also have Justin Engelmeier here. He's our vice president at Interlog USA. And then Ben is our guest speaker today. He's the director of operations. He'll be kind of sharing some insights with us today. So yeah, if you have any questions, get them in the Q&A and we can kind of get started. A hot topic I know that everyone has kind of been hearing about is some closures happening overseas. And so Justin, I don't know if you want to quick hop in and kind of touch on some of the closures happening.
Sure. So they're happening all over the place, but right now one of the big ones is over in Vietnam. We have customers where their suppliers are completely shut down. We have customers where they're not able to get stuff out of ports. Ben, do you want to touch a little bit on that? I know there's somewhat of a mixture of whether or not it's a supplier issue versus a transportation issue, and is it all ports out of Vietnam, or is it just one, or what are you seeing on your end?
Sure, let's start with Vietnam. There's two main ports in Vietnam, Hai Phong in the north, that's near Hanoi, and Ho Chi Minh City in the south. If there's to be a volume split, Ho Chi Minh is the larger of the two, but they're both significant ports for the country. Different types of production for both. But the COVID impact is so far only in the south around Ho Chi Minh, and that's an impact on all the factories. Our customers are seeing a shutdown of about 70 or 80% of their factories, which is a significant amount, especially for a population that lives day to day. So if they're not paid today, they don't eat today. They go back home to their villages in the central part of the country. And they wait.
Sorry, are the suppliers able to then move their stuff to the other port if the suppliers are open?
No, it's quite a long ways. It would be equivalent to moving from Savannah to New York.
Sure.
And really, this is just a shutdown of the factories. The trucking has stopped around Ho Chi Minh, essentially, putting a lot of strain on Hai Phong, an emphasis there. So more carriers are collecting more containers out of the north. Good news is if the factories are in production in the south, they're enjoying reduced rates because of the low demand in southern Vietnam right now.
Well, at least someone's getting the lower rates.
Yeah, that's true.
So with that being said, are you hearing anything at all about them reopening, or is it just, are they waiting for their cases to go down, the COVID cases, the Delta variants? What do they give any sign or indication of it coming back?
Right. Well, the government's saying it is a Delta variant that's causing the high COVID case increase. However, they never really were fully vaccinated to begin with. So they're waiting it out for case numbers to go down. But if they're waiting for vaccination, that would be a long time coming. So hopefully their quarantine can provide the impact they need so they can return to work.
And so our partners that you work with over in Vietnam, are they still working? Are you still speaking with them frequently, or are they waiting to get stuff back up and going, or where are they standing?
They're in a holding pattern for sure, producing what they can. Sometimes that means just keeping their inventory on site until relief comes. Forecasts right now are less and less optimistic than it was 3 weeks ago when this all started. But we're hearing potential of maybe October when things return back to normal. That's the timeline they're giving us.
Fair enough. And then if we transition over to China here, where everyone's moving stuff out of, we see congestion in different ports, move from one to another, kind of playing hopscotch all over the place here. If you have Qingdao, which has been congested for quite a while now, and we're moving stuff down to Shanghai. I know we've been doing that for a lot of customers, and They've been having to bite that bullet and pay the trucking, which is, I believe, a few hours down to Shanghai. But now you're getting stuff closed in Ningbo. Is Ningbo completely shut down? I feel like there's some terminals that might still be open. There might be some carriers moving out of that terminal versus the other one. I imagine there's multiple terminals there. What's going on in Ningbo at the moment? And are we still able to move stuff out of there? And is it affecting Shanghai?
Yeah, can I address that in two parts?
Sure.
First, I'm saying, yeah, there's heavy congestion throughout China and an emphasis on the base ports, which is Shenzhen, Shanghai, Ningbo, and Tianjin in the north. Some of the smaller ones, Lianyungang, Qingdao, Dalian, Xiamen, Foshan. Those smaller ports are not getting the space. The carriers aren't collecting many containers from there. So we're trucking it to the larger base ports I mentioned. Ningbo is one of those base ports, and it has several terminals. The Meishan terminal is the one that is in the news right now because of the worker with COVID and the shutdown there. So while it's a total shutdown of that one terminal, it only represents a relatively small percentage of all the Ningbo cargo. And even within that percentage, to give you some numbers, there were 7 vessels that skipped Ningbo this service loop because of the impact on that one terminal. There were 10 vessels that called a different terminal within Ningbo. They still got containers out just through a different terminal. And I expect that to repeat next week until the workers return to the Meishan terminal.
So now so it's been kind of, if the departure date, let's say, is supposed to be the 15th, it's now been pushed out to 6 days past that or something like that, 5 or 6 days past that. Are we seeing that being pushed out even more if more vessels are leaving out of different terminals? Or they're being consolidated in one terminal?
Well, at the Meishan terminal, they're already at 100% capacity. So this timing worked out pretty well for them to build some relief and just divert the full containers to different terminals. So overall, when the picture is already, I don't say bleak, but a lot of congestion in the Shanghai Ningbo area, the diversion to another terminal is not overly significant. So let's just say, yes, there'll be 1 week delays for a small portion of cargo going through Shanghai Ningbo.
Okay, and are we still able to get departures within a 2-week range or so out of that Shanghai Ningbo area? Because I feel like that's what we've been doing for the majority of the summer, is around within 2 weeks, we should be able to get departures.
Certainly, especially port to port. And that's what we'll get to next is the what we call IPI, to the inland places like Chicago, St. Louis, Memphis. Those bookings are harder to come by. They're usually 3 or 4 weeks out. So as rates are increasing, it's less and less attractive to wait 4 weeks for a booking to Chicago, when instead you could sail it within 2 weeks to the seaport and then do a transload or cross dock into a 53-foot trailer truck, taking it to the final destination.
But you bring up Chicago, and Chicago, while it might be 3 or 4 weeks out, Chicago is the one area that we're actually able to get an IPI or the inland, the rail to. So what about St. Louis and Kansas City and Omaha, Dallas? I mean, those things are all but non-existent. Those bookings don't even seem to be out there right now. Are they just pushed out so far where no one books them there, or what's the story behind that?
It's customer dependent based on their budget and their timeline. We are booking to those places. Now we see them rolled about half the time, but we do get spaces for about 3 to 4 weeks out right now. And
in all those areas, not just Chicago.
Well, Chicago is relatively easy. I'm speaking more about Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Columbus, Memphis, those types of rail depots.
Sure. And then even within Chicago, because then a lot of people are sending it to Chicago to then get it to those other areas that you were just mentioning. I know Chicago, that's a point of contention with stuff just getting stuck in the rail yard and getting truckers out of there, and because that's overwhelmed at the moment. But I know we have a lot of vendors out there in Chicago that are helping us with that, and it's not necessarily the trucking for us, but just getting it out of that rail ramp. What's that delay look like in the rail yard?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of agility in the last year. As we see one port close, that presents a lot of demand for the nearby port, or as Minneapolis bookings reduce, we can get to the reasoning why there's fewer bookings to these inland places a little bit later. But as those close down, Chicago gets a lot of demand. So what you've been seeing is, yes, the container arrives to Seattle, the ETA to Chicago is 7 days later, but more often than not, it'll get 6 days down the rail and it'll park outside of Chicago at like a waiting area until the space is alleviated within Chicago. And the truckers can actually get to these containers once they've been grounded.
Sure.
A 7-day inland transit turns into 10, 12 days.
But now, how much of a difference is there if we're going to send it to the West Coast? Because I feel like a vast majority of the time, that's what we're emphasizing to our customers, and that's what we're telling them is probably their best option in getting it there if they need it there faster. Is that more because you're going to get a booking out of China a lot faster to the West Coast, or is it because of this congestion inland and then the delays that you're going to see on the rail, both on the West Coast and then also once it gets to Chicago or whatever point it gets to?
Yeah, so our pricing team runs the numbers for 2 different scenarios, and the important components are what's the timeline for the customer, what's their budget. Well, that's becoming more and more of a wash because these inland rail moves adds another $10,000 on to the booking. So it's about the same cost effectiveness just to stop it on the West Coast, cross dock it and truck it in. And then that brings up the third component is how is the cargo packaged? If it's floor loaded, small boxes, we're going to need to palletize and wrap it. Makes for a nice delivery as long as that's what the customer wants.
Sure. So right now, in a perfect world for operations, in order for us to get the cargo to someone as fast as possible, if it's coming out of Shanghai, bring it into the West Coast, transload it, then bring it inland. Is that kind of
on the East Coast and a lot in Houston too?
Sure. And how are we able to get capacity going to the East Coast just as easily as the West Coast? And by easily, I mean within 2 weeks departures?
Yes. I would say port to port booking we can obtain within a 2-week departure, as long as it's a base port. Some of those smaller ones I mentioned, Dalian, Qingdao, Lianyungang, the logical way to move that cargo out as rates increase, move it out sooner, is to spend the money to truck it to the larger port.
Sure. And so with most of these closures and everything that's going on over there, it's a lot of doom and gloom, and we feel like we're kind of stuck in the same stuff. But I guess what we're trying to tell our customers and what you guys are able to find for us, for the customers, is there is a solution. It's not the most pleasant thing to go through, but there are solutions, and we can get the freight here. We just have to work and be somewhat flexible on how to do that. Is that not accurate?
No, it is. And customers have been very tolerant in the last 6 months. I know there's a lot of shock about a year ago as rates started to increase and bookings were reduced. But now people are readjusting the sites just to make sure that products landed here within their timeline that they need for production or put it on the retail shelves.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. And do you foresee anything going on else within China? I know they're talking about protecting Beijing due to the Olympics and all that stuff coming up here. And hopefully there aren't more closures and all that. But as they seem to come, it still seems like they're leaving certain areas open where we're able to get something out and through and back over here.
Yeah, without going down the rabbit hole, the Chinese are very good at release information as they see fit. Now, there was a COVID exposure in Nanjing, a small suburb.
A lot of factories are there, right?
A large manufacturing location, and that city was cordoned off by the Chinese government until they declared that it was safe to continue exports from Nanjing manufacturing factories. But you're talking about the The Olympics, that's in February, which coincides with Chinese New Year. So it's all happening at the same time when there'd be a natural shutdown of the factories and shipping anyway. That's February 2022. But they'll be on the world stage. The Chinese government has already said they're not going to have any foreign spectators come, it'll just be the athletes. But they'll do what they can to improve the air quality, which in northern China is not great. Anywhere from Shanghai north, Qingdao, Tianjin, Dalian, and a lot of the events will be in Harbin in the far north. You can see or expect to see reduced manufacturing starting in the month of January.
That makes sense.
Prepare for that. If rates haven't plateaued by then, they won't. We're starting to talk about forecasting for potential decreases after Chinese New Year of 2022.
Yeah, I think everyone's shuffling and waiting for that, but they still need their product now. So it's something that everyone's hoping for, and hopefully it gets here, and we can relieve some of this pain here with the congestion and all that. Rachel, Courtney, do we have some questions or something that anyone was asking us?
Yeah, absolutely. I can hop in and ask some of those. A few are about Chinese New Year and the Olympics. So I won't re-ask those questions. You guys just went over that. Someone is asking, like we've talked a lot about China and, Vietnam, but are those conditions constant in other countries? Are we seeing those same conditions in Europe like at this time, or kind of what is that area looking like?
Well, I feel like it's stretching capacity everywhere here. And I know that the bookings are pushed out all over Europe, and we're still able to get cargo out of Europe. But Ben, do you want to touch on why you think that is, and what to what extent it is over there?
In Europe, Indonesia, India, it's more of a factor of the vessel space. Even the largest customers, routinely exporting 15 containers a week, 25 containers a week out of Europe, are being reduced to a diet of 5 to 10 per week, which means the sporadic importers of European cargo, those that have one every month or every 6 months, really need to plan far in advance. Right. We're doing bookings right now for exports out of Poland, Germany, Italy. Italy's a little different. Southern Europe is better than the north. But for sure, Northern European countries have to be looking 5+ weeks out. If you're thinking Italy and Spain and Fos-sur-Mer in the south of France, 2 or 3 weeks is acceptable. Any less than that is really pushing it.
Makes sense. Yeah, we can go into another question. And once again, if anyone listening has any questions, you guys can type those in at this time. We'll take a few more. The next question has to do with FMC congestion surcharges. People are wondering what's kind of going on with that, what we're seeing. Just some insight on that would be great.
Well, that came out at the beginning of August, and they've already decreased here in the second half. So we've seen that coming down to some extent. And I don't know if that's going away. Ben, do you think it's completely going away next month, or is it going to stick around for a little bit and the carriers are just going to collect whatever they can? That's what it feels like, at least to customers, is you just have carriers trying to come up with another excuse as to getting some more money out of them.
That's right, and these congestion fees are published widely. There's been some change to it, but I wouldn't read into that as rates are decreasing. Hapag-Lloyd had a $5,000 container congestion fee that they cut in half. Zim had a $3,000 one that they cut down to $1,000. The rest basically float between $1,000 and $2,000 a container, and those carriers haven't retracted them. So I think they're here to stay through September. The FMC is doing an investigation into the legitimacy. I don't have a lot of faith that that's going to have any impact. I just feel that when the carriers reduced theirs, they overshot a little bit, and they just brought it back down to competitive level with the others.
So they got slightly greedy, and now they
Slightly, yeah. Well,
all right.
Slightly greedy in the carriers this year. So.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So someone has a comment, and they're saying that we are hearing in Yantian that there are further delays due to required vessel inspections due to COVID. this is creating further delays, or at least for them. Have you guys been seeing a lot of vessel inspection delays or any of that lately?
I'll let Ben take that one.
Not any more than has already been happening. So if customers are already tolerant of these departure delays, these kind of floating schedules, there's not much change now. What they're saying is if something is scheduled to depart on August 20th, that might be bumped to the 21st or 22nd. The impact that has is the ship won't allow, the Yantian port won't allow that full container to come in until 2 or 3 days before the ship sails. Historically, it's been the week prior, or up to 10 days prior to departure. But with these over congested terminals, they can only allow it to be there 2 or 3 days in advance. So when they were thinking about dropping it off on the 15th, because the departure was the 18th, now they have to find a way to truck it in that meets the new sales schedule. So it has to arrive on the 19th.
All right, the next question, this is our last one as of right now. So if there are any last minute ones, feel free to put these in. So someone is saying that they are starting to see delays at Rotterdam 4 weeks now to get onto a feeder vessel. Are there predictions for Rotterdam going forward? And is this expected through the end of the year?
It definitely is. A lot of our European partners are working farther in advance than 4 weeks. And one thing we haven't really touched on, and we can get to it later, but carriers are avoiding sending any containers on the rail if they can help it. So our European partners are stuck booking things to New York, and we have to either cross-dock it and put it on our rail containers, which are 53-foot rail containers, and take it the rest of the way inland or by truck. Those options are all there. The timeline changes, the budget has to change, but cargo has to move, and it continues to move, whether it's from Europe or Asia. The carriers just don't want to lose money. When those containers are what we call dwell time, moving inland, getting unloaded, waiting to be re-exported, that's time that the container is not making money for the carriers. We're hoping to see a change when the U.S. harvest season is shipping out a lot of 20s and 40-foot containers from the Midwest. This is late October, November, but there hasn't been an indication of increased bookings yet, those inland places.
Well, I guess we'll see how it goes, but those are all of the questions for today. So I will step out.
Good. Thanks, Courtney. Before we end it, Justin or Ben, do you have any last comments you'd like to say? Are we all set?
No, I think we're good. I think what people were able to hear today is a lot of times Ben and I have these conversations on a daily basis. So I hear the customer side of the story, and then I go to Ben and hear his side of the story to figure out what we're able to do for our customers. So hopefully people enjoyed the fact that they were able to kind of get that front row seat to Ben instead of just talking to me.
It's been a pleasure discussing it all. Make one note, people should be marking their calendars for Golden Week in China. It's October 2nd to the 7th. That'll be a week-long shutdown of factories and shipping. So if I haven't said it enough to plan in advance, to talk with us or their forwarder about space at least 2 or 3 weeks in advance, should do it now. Send those PO numbers, the ready dates for your suppliers to the Chinese booking agent or to us, and we can get it set up, work out a plan sooner than later.
Sounds good. Well, Ben, thanks for being our guest star here today. We really enjoyed all the insight that you brought. Courtney and Justin, it's a pleasure always. Just to kind of move forward, we always have our coffee and cargo webinars every third week of the month. There's always a link on our Competitive Edge newsletter that goes out every Wednesday. So stay tuned for that going out to get yourself signed up for next month's coffee and cargo. We always do love to hear feedback as well. But thanks again, and we'll see you guys next month.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure.